All right, Team ET, we have a very special guest joining us today. I'm extremely excited and humbled to be able to introduce Dr. Marcia Reynolds, one of my longtime idols, I have to say. So welcome, Marcia, to the ET project. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me to be here.
It's definitely my pleasure. So look, we have a little bit of a ritual where we normally kick off by asking if you have any fun facts on the top of your mind that you would share with our listeners.
Well, I know you're going to ask me about my career path, but what a lot of people don't know is my very first job, my first master's degree was broadcasting. So I was hired by a psychiatric hospital as the AV coordinator to push around the TVs and the film projectors and, to make sure everybody had all of their AV equipment. And they always said they weren't technical, so I had to, put everything together and plug everything in for them. So I also went and joined a gym so I could improve my upper body strength because all the equipment was really big and heavy back then. But it was for a training department, and that's how I ended up in training.
Well, that saves the question for later. So thank you for that. That interesting. It's amazing how our careers transgress over the years.
Yes.
When we first start, we seldom end up where we finish. So great. Thank you for sharing that. Anything around you or in the world today that's exciting you?
There's so much in the world that's scary. But I think what's exciting is how many people are coming together to create community and help us to see beyond the scary. So it's not just to soften our feelings, but to ignite hope and possibilities. And I get more and more requests for, how can you get people to see what joy and light we can bring into our world, So I think it's great how we unite to help each other get through difficult times.
Right, and very important at the moment, of course, right, with so much uncertainty around us. Okay, so that's a somewhat of a nice lead-in, I guess, to the question I like to ask around career. So our listener base are executive talents, and with your background, I'm sure there are many stories over your career that would be of interest to them. Is there anything that jumps out to you, top of mind, that might be of interest about your career?
Well, it's interesting because I think even with my first master's, I was always looking at how can I use this to help people get through difficult times. So even with the broadcasting, I was looking at using video as a communication tool to help people broaden their perspective. So when I got in the training department, and then she ended up dumping my first training assignment was to do the management training. It's why I went back and got a second degree so I could understand how to design training. But it got me very curious about learning and what really changes people's minds. And the original management training and still a lot of it is how do you tell people what to do? How do you give them feedback? How do you direct them? When when I found coaching, I found no, it's not about what you say, it's how you listen. And who you are to them, and that they trust you and that you can explore together. So there was a real shift in who are we as leaders? And what can we do that can inspire people to want to grow, which is the essential piece. So it's been an interesting journey, and in learning and discovering what changes people honestly and over time, and applying that to what I share with other people.
And you have such a broad spectrum of coverage across the world. I think in your bio you talk about 43 different countries that you have coached leaders and supported leaders in. It's quite remarkable. One of the classes I believe that you share with leaders is Leader as a Coach, and you're also helping organizations in different countries as a member of faculty. I'm wondering, with all that exposure, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing or you're hearing about from the leaders around the whole topic of introducing coaching into their organizations?
Yeah. Actually in my book, The Discomfort Zone, I have a whole chapter on the 5 myths that leaders rely on to not coach. And the number one is they say, I don't have time. And, the question always is, okay, so you're telling me that you would rather spend your time having them constantly come to you and ask you for your opinion, your advice, and how you see things, because you've not developed their own minds to do that you would rather do that than take a little bit more time up front to help them to see what they can do on their own. And so you're developing their minds. You're just, and activating their minds, not pacifying their minds. So the myth of I don't have time, and the better you get at coaching, the quicker it is. Most of my coaching demonstrations last 15 minutes, and the person has a breakthrough and knows what to do. So you don't need an hour or 2 hours. And I see that more of, I don't have time to develop the skill to be able to do this, not I don't have time to sit with them and coach them. So I think the time is the biggest issue. And it does take a change in mindset and skills. And there's always an awkwardness and a period of where I'm uncomfortable doing this until I know how to do it. And humans by nature don't like to be uncomfortable, so they avoid the learning by using the excuses.
Yeah, very interesting. So if you were to give them some support as the coach, how would you what would you recommend to them to make that step? Is there anything specific that you would suggest?
Well, sometimes it's just as easy as turning it around when somebody comes to them and says, I don't know what to do. What do you think? Which again is another excuse leaders say, but they're always asking me, and so why don't I just give it to them?
Right.
But can you just easily turn around and say, I know you have a lot of experience with this. I'd like to hear your perspective first. What have you been considering you might do? Because generally it's not that they don't know what to do. They're afraid to take the risk of what they know what to do. So you can just easily turn it around and say, I'd just like to hear what you've been thinking about. And let them share, I think maybe this, maybe that, and help them look at, what could happen if you tried this. Because again, you're activating their mind, and next time they'll do it on their own, and they won't come in your office and ask you for, I don't know what to do. What's your idea?
Right. Yeah. Very good. You've written a number of books throughout your career and your journey. I think roughly 4 books since 2010. Would that be correct?
Well, yeah, counting that one of them was a second edition.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the how to outsmart your brain, right? Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, so you at least 4 by my counts. I stand corrected if I'm wrong. I noticed that there's a number of books also in the prior decade. And as you said, How to Outsmart Your Brain, I think you probably have 3 editions now, right? Or something like that within this period. So the question, I've written 1 book, so you're way ahead of me. The question that resonates with me a lot is, what are you hoping to achieve when you first set out to write a book? Like, do you have any specific objective that triggers you and sets the chain of thought off, or is it more random than that?
No, generally, after I write a book, I say, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to write another book. But then I see a great need.
Right.
I see a great need. So I feel like I'm filling a gap that's needed out in the world, that like even with coaching, people are starting to get into bad habits, and some of the schools are not teaching in a way that gives them freedom in their conversations. And so I'm filling a need, and the first book, 2010, of the 4 that you're looking at, was actually based on my doctoral dissertation for high achieving women in the workplace, because all the books at that time in research were on, that women were passive and didn't know how to speak up. And, I was like, that's not my clients, or they don't know how to say no. And I'm like, my clients don't say no because they think that they're the only ones that can do it right. What about smart, strong women in the workplace? So I did the research, I wrote the book, and the book still gets comments from women leaders around the world like, thank you for writing something for me. I thought something was wrong with me.
Right. Very good.
So when I see a need, I want to fill it with what I've learned, to give people a better chance to master what they're doing.
Yeah, understood. In many of the books, at least of the ones that I've looked at, and I haven't, and the one you're talking about is, how do I pronounce it? Is it Wonder Woman or Wonder
Wander.
Woman?
Because, it's an archetype. We tend to wander. Well, when we've had enough, we move on to something else. And at the time, I found women actually change jobs more frequently than men.
Right.
They kept saying, oh, because they want to support their families. It's like, no, they felt that they were not getting enough challenges, and they wanted to be challenged and learn more, so they moved on to somewhere else. So it's Wonder Woman.
And I have to admit, it's probably my bias that stopped me from reading. What do I want to read a woman's book for? Right? So,
but it's interesting because a lot of men have said thank you for helping me understand the women that work for me, but also thank you for helping me understand my wife and my kids, my daughters. So
I'll definitely make the effort to go out and read it. The other 3 books, The Discomfort Zone, How to Outsmart Your Brain, and Coach the Person, Not the Problem. And we'll talk more on Coach the Person, Not the Problem in a moment. In all of those books, there's a discussion around your emotion and coping with emotions. And I'm just wondering, is there an emotion that you've identified when you're writing a book that you have to cope with to help you see the journey through when you're writing?
How interesting. Well, I know something I experienced, that everyone I know that's written a book at some point in your writing, at least after you're like halfway through, you're sitting there going, who's going to read this? It's like, it's already out in the world. Nobody's going to read this book. And I'm giving away all this time when I could be outside and enjoying myself. And I'm sitting here, so there's a little bit of frustration and fear, that goes on. And how many times people, as they get toward the end of the book, it's like, well, now I have to put it out in the public and put it out for their approval. And how many bad reviews am I going to get? So the doubt as well, it's like in anything that we moving and trying to accomplish, how can I stay positive that this is going to have a good outcome? So, I come back to always my purpose, that I'm doing this not for me, but for them. I'm not doing this to be famous. Um, it's like great that I've created this visibility out in the world, but I'm doing this because I really want to make a difference. I want to be helpful. I want us all to elevate our consciousness, and leaders have an important space to do that. And so when I come back to my mission, my purpose, I stay with it. I stay consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm going to take a little bit of a sidestep here now and just ask you a stray question, if I can frame it that way. If you could gift any leader one thing that would help them prepare for the future,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I'm actually creating a leaders coach program right now for a very large, well-known global company, and they said, "Can you incorporate some information about the current CEO of Microsoft?" And
Okay.
his greatest quote is, "Don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all." And I'm like, I love that. That if you could go into every conversation with curiosity, saying, I don't know. I don't know what this person needs. I don't know what's going to happen in this conversation. And just, use beginner's mind and be curious of what's going to happen today. I think that's the greatest skill that leaders can develop and emotion, because curiosity is an emotion. So it's not just an open mind, it's a total openness to what we can discover together right now.
Right. Beautiful. That's a nice segue in some regards, because the next question I intend to ask is about reflective inquiry, which is really very much about what your latest or your last book is about, Coach the Person, Not the Problem. And I've looked at your agenda for the Breakthrough Coaching Program as well, and I see there's a bit of a theme with this as well. So essentially, if I understand correctly, the message is that we need to place more importance on reflective inquiry rather than what we traditionally learn when we're going through coaching programs, which is all about asking good questions, powerful questions.
Yeah.
Right? Could you elaborate a little bit more on the reflective inquiry construct, please?
Well, first, that's another myth, that coaching is all about asking questions. I remember even Marshall Goldsmith saying, nobody wants you to sit there and just ask them questions. I'm like, that's true. I was a part of creating the coaching competencies for the International Coach Federation way back, 20 years ago. And it was never intended to only be questions, that there's a lot of competencies about reflect what you hear, summarize, paraphrase, share what you notice in the shift of their emotions. It's always been there. So I'd been using the term reflective inquiry. So when I went to write Coach the Person, I'm like, where did that come from? And I went back into all my psychology work, and it wasn't there. I went back into the 80s, my second master's in learning, and found that it was coined by an educational reformer he wrote a book 1910 called How We Think, where he defined coaching. He wanted teachers to get students to think more broadly by just sharing back. So here's what I hear that you believe. Where did that belief come from? Is there anything else you can see? So it's the reflection that makes the question more powerful. And that when we look at coaching, I'm your thinking partner. I'm not the expert. I'm not the healer. I'm here to help you think. And I think it's even more powerful that when I just summarize, well, here's what I heard you say and what's important to you. How powerful that is when people start being able to see their thinking for themselves, which they cannot do on their own. The brain doesn't allow them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But when they start to take out their thinking and look at it outside of themselves, they start to see the gaps in their logic and the assumptions they're making with no evidence, and the beliefs they've been holding on to that are no longer true. And so it's the reflection, and the question is the follow-up to the reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And so many coaches and leaders don't get that. They think it's the powerful question, but where does the question come from? And then they say to me, well, they memorize lists of questions, or they read a book that gives them questions, which means they're coaching from memory and not being present with the person, not what's happening in the moment. So I'm like, cut it out. Thinking is the enemy of the coach. Be present and just share. Receive what they're giving you and share it back and see what happens. It's really powerful.
Very nice. And I really want to share with the listeners that you're sitting there and it's 5:30 a.m. in the morning where you are. So I'd love to check in with you. How are you at the moment? Are you feeling okay? Everything's...
I'm okay. I'm a very, very early riser. I live in Arizona where it's extremely hot. And if I wouldn't be talking to you, I'd be out taking a walk. It's the only time we can walk is early in the morning. And I was born here, so I'm used to getting up early. So don't worry about it.
I was looking at your body language coming alive. So listening to your suggestion.
And I have my coffee.
You have your coffee, yeah, very, very powerful. In the book as well, you also, well, the majority of the book talks about 5 essential techniques. We're not going to go through those today, so we'll keep a little bit of mystique for the readers. But you also talk about 3 mental habits. Mm-hmm. And when I read them and I reflected on my own leadership career, I think these are so powerful. And I would really love to spend a little bit of time, if you don't mind, just touching on those 3 habits.
Well, because mastery, I see coaching mastery as a deepening of presence, not just what the perfection of skills, finding the perfect question and doing it right. That it's the presence, the energy we bring to any conversation, any leadership conversation, any conversation with people, that the emotional energy we bring is just important as the words we say. And we often forget that, especially when we're busy and we're frustrated and impatient. So the 3 mental habits, the first one, and I've done a lot of research in writing around opening the entire nervous system. Mm-hmm. Because we talk a lot about the open mind, but there's 3 major organs attached to a big nerve that are constantly talking to each other and receiving and putting out energy. And that's the heart and the gut as well as the head. And so, on my website, I have a visualization of opening the head, heart, and gut. But the research shows that not only can you hear what people want and need beyond their words, but they feel safe with you. And there's all this research about the safety people feel, which means that they're willing to open up to you and look at mistakes they've made in the past, what's possible going forward. So we do open our mind with curiosity, but do you care about this person in front of you? They're going to know, or at least believe in them, even if they've disappointed you. And so we open our heart with that, and then our gut we open with courage, to try coaching even when it feels awkward. So we open the three centers in our nervous system with emotions: curiosity, care, and courage. That should be done before every conversation, quickly. Just to breathe and to open our centers. Then you're able to receive, not just listen. And I say listen feels like something we do to people. But when I'm patiently receiving what you're saying and what you're expressing in the moment, and I can receive it with my entire nervous system, then I can hear the most important things to you. I can hear the fears behind your words, your doubts, your worries, your concerns, your frustrations. I'll hear those most important words. People always say, how did you pick that up? I said, because I wasn't thinking in the moment. I was just receiving. In fact, I don't think when I'm having these conversations. I just receive it and offer it back and ask them, what do they think about that? So it's receive, don't just listen. And the third one, which is so critical, is to catch and release judgment. Because we're all judgy by nature. That it's the way our brain protects us. We walk into a room, we have to know what's safe, what's not safe, where to sit, who to talk to. So there's nobody that's non-judgmental. It doesn't exist. I can remember being in another country where somebody said something that, boy, just triggered me, my whole value system, and I could feel it in my body. I went, oh, look, there's my judgment. It's an emotion. And if you can catch that tenseness when you tighten up because you don't agree with what they're saying, it's not right, it's wrong, whatever that is, or you don't like them or whatever, and just breathe into that tension, release it, and come back to be present and believe that, in the possibility. Judgment derails us, and we're doing it all the time. So I always say the practice is go places it's going to trigger your judgment, like the airport, the grocery store. For me, it's seeing my sister, and go, oh, look, there's my judgment, and breathe and release it. So you can start recognizing the moment you feel judgment. So you can breathe and release it and come back to be present, because people know when you judge them. So can you come back and again, just believe in the possibility that maybe we can move through this today?
So powerful. And I was visualizing while you were speaking about how often I would be guilty as charged for allowing my biases, my judgments to cloud my listening ability. For sure, it's a hugely important message. So thank you for sharing that. I'm conscious of the time, and I know that you have some exciting news. I don't know if you want to talk about it here, but I believe there may be another book in the pipeline.
Well, I have this new program we just launched for WBEX. It's a self-study course on breakthrough coaching. So you can access it at any time zone. You can go through quickly and not so quickly. And I put in a lot of new material. There's 22 videos, 22 resource tools and practice, and you can join a whole community. I'm very excited. And my editor for my books said, what are you working on? And I told him. He said, oh, I like that title. I said, I don't own it. I do this with WBEX, the World Business and Executive Coaching Summit. I said, it's co-trademarked. And so we got to talking, and we said, well, what about if we tried to do a partnership? And so I talked to WBEX, and they're very excited. So I brought together my publisher with WBEX, and they talked me into writing another book that my publisher then will put a page in the back to promote my breakthrough coaching programs. And WBEX will promote it to their hundreds of thousands of people on their database. So it's a win-win situation. I already have most of the content. So, and then we've decided that we'll launch it next year in conjunction with the new certification program for breakthrough coaching. So they've talked me into another book that will be breakthrough coaching. It'll come out, 9 months, a year from now, but it'll complement the program that's out there and a new program that we'll be launching. So it's exciting. It's exciting.
I'm really interested what was going through your mind while you were explaining that. Your body language, you lit up, your face lit up while you were explaining that. So I can sense that there's a lot of passion and pride behind this particular project.
Yeah. Well, the breakthrough coaching program, they keep pushing me, for more, which means that I've got to go out and do more research and work with people that my gurus and so it's not a typical program. And every time I put it out there, there's new things that excite me to share. So I'm not doing the same program over and over and over. And so even the people that went through the original breakthrough coaching, if they go through this one, they're going to see there's new things. And so I'm excited that, they frustrate me, they keep pushing me, they want more and more and more all the time, but then it forces me to create new material, new exercises, new tools that we can put out in the world. So it's a frustration that's exciting.
I look forward to it very much. So I'll be waiting for the next 12 months.
For the book, but the program's out there.
Absolutely. Any key takeaways before we wrap up our discussion or our conversation today? Any message you would love to leave to the world, or at least to this audience that we have?
Well, I said to you about it being present, knowing what emotions, as a leader, even if you're running a team, a conversation, you set the emotional tone. You are the weather. And so being present to your emotions and shifting them and staying with the person, they want you to be present and to care. They don't need you to be perfect and to know everything.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to let you get on with your very early morning start and conclude here, but I would just like to end by saying thank you very much once again. Where would people go to find some of your material, to find more about yourself, your books?
Well, my website is Covisioning. Actually, outsmartyourbrain.com. Will get you to the website, but it's covisioning.com, but people don't always spell that right.
Okay, we'll
either
link
one will get you there. Covisioning, Covisioning.
All right.
And all my books and materials are there, or just I sent you the link on the Breakthrough Coaching Program. Yes. So both of those show my work. But on my website, all my books and resource materials and all kind of my blog. I'm just about to put out a new blog on why you should forget trying to do time management. So go there. You'll get lots of new stuff all the time.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Dr. Reynolds, Marcia Reynolds, it's been a wonderful delight, a highlight of my career, let's say. So thank you very much for taking the time to have a conversation, not only with me, but with our listeners on the ET project. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.